Hello and welcome to this Register Webcast that's coming to you by audio this time, just to show that we are fully on top of technology and we can work in any medium. And as we are continuing our series of philosophical questions asked by the Register to each other and to the audience, this time it's about who are we? Why are we here? What's going on? But largely what's at the center of our very identity. Yes, we're focusing on identity this time, and identity is changing. The world of identity that we know it, I'm sure if you've been involved in identity and access management over the years, you've probably been through a few hoops in order to put in place IAM strategies and so on. But as we know, and as I'm sure you've experienced, the context is changing. Customers are changing. Customers are no longer internal, they're external. So we're going to be looking at these topics and trying to work out how to get from problems to solutions and from these understandings of solutions through to business cases and through to actually delivering identity and access management solutions that fit the needs of today. And to help me answer these very, very deep philosophical and rather technical questions, we've got a panel. So on my panel today, there's myself, Jon Collins, as I said. I've got the stalwart Tony Locke, who's sitting next to me, from analyst firm Freeform Dynamics, and coming in from San Francisco, all the way from San Francisco, which is another reason why we're doing this audio only, is Nadav Benbarak from Okta, funnily enough, identity and access management company. Nadav, maybe you could tell us about what you really want to get out of this webinar and why this topic's so important today.
Thanks, John. To me, what's really important is that the competitive landscape has changed. Companies need to evolve how they compete. And I want to help folks understand a new category of tool that can help them move faster and serve their customers better.
Well, moving faster is a bit of an issue today, isn't it? With all the existing companies moving slower, is business as usual for many very big companies, but they might feel that they're being taken advantage of and being outflanked by smaller startups that seem to have all of this stuff nailed.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. So I think it's fair to say that there's an upheaval in business, and that's due to the ubiquity of web and mobile technology and the web. Today the cost of creating a startup and building a new technology is far lower than it ever has been. And that means that people are taking new tools and applying them to old problems in a way that can threaten even the most stable incumbents. I want to share a couple examples. A company called Metro Mile, a really interesting company. They have taken a unique approach to car insurance, and what they do is they provide customers with a small device that connects into the car, and it monitors the amount that the car drives. And that's able to then create an uplink to the Metro Mile service and capture all this data about the driving behavior and the amount of miles driven. And thereby, they're able to sell insurance based on how much you actually drive versus selling you a package that kind of is designed for the average person. Now, if you think about it, these guys are in the business of selling less for less. They want to sell you less insurance, where most insurance companies are really organized around trying to sell you more insurance and get more of your wallet. So very, very hard for an established player to compete with these guys. Another example I want to share is a company called FieldPoint Private. This is a company that we partner with here at Okta. And FieldPoint Private is a unique company. They are founded by a group of high net worth individuals who were really dissatisfied with the service they were getting from the JP Morgans and Credit Suisses of the world in terms of wealth management, and they decided to create their own service, their own company to manage their wealth. What's amazing about this story is that they're able to pull the best-of-breed technologies off the shelf, tools like Salesforce, tools like Advent, Black Diamond. They're able to pull those things together, and with an IT staff of just 4, they're able to create what is essentially a wealth management firm and a bank. So unbelievable efficiency and leverage. And here what you see is their mobile experience. They've got everything with just packaging together the best technology out there. So it certainly is a new world order. It's not to say that the incumbents aren't adapting, but the competitive landscape has changed, and every company needs to think about how it's going to remain competitive in this context.
It's funny that, funnily enough, just today I was talking to a colleague about what I'm going to do with all my vast wealth. And I wish I'd thought of this option as putting an app together to manage my enormous funds. It's a problem that many of us face, and how we cope with this challenge, I do not know. But I think what is happening here, and what's interesting, this isn't just about giving people access to systems or managing that system's access. This is about what you can then do and how you can innovate once you've given people direct access into your traditional corporate systems.
But it does throw up lots of questions around identity and context in particular.
You've got to get
that really throws people out.
You've got to get that basics right, haven't you?
It's context.
Yeah. I mean, Tony, maybe how are you seeing this reflected in the research? Is it that companies are full steam ahead buying into this, or are they kind of still behind the curve?
Depends on the organization. Many enterprises that exist now, including some of the big insurance companies in Europe, which are trying to do similar things to the Metro Mile experience that Nadav was just going through, are trying to grapple with this. But it means that they're facing lots of challenges because, in essence, interpersonal experiences and meeting customers face to face is not going to go away, as you can see from the research evidence from the readers of the register here. But the growth in contact, face to face, is not going to be anywhere near the same order of magnitude as those that are coming in through, mobile devices in particular, the web generally, but also in all the social interactions. And that means really having to understand who people are, where they are, how they're interacting, and importantly, understanding what restrictions you might need to apply on top of that. So getting that identity right is really important. So things are changing, absolutely.
I mean, it's a big opportunity, but it's a scary one at the same time because you've got to do it right.
It is, because the big thing here is that as these operations expand and you bring in more and more people, potentially more and more different types of identity, not just people, you get into a situation whereby manual processes simply no longer work. Now, you could argue, and the readers of the register tell us, that the manual process, even in ordinary enterprises today, no longer work. So that's something that clearly needs a lot of automation put into things just to keep risk down and everything working properly.
I mean, I did want to just make the point, and maybe flick back to you, Nadav, for a moment, about this is not just the small companies that are whopping the big companies. There are some good examples of big companies like MGM Life doing the right thing with their customer engagement.
Yeah. Before I get to that, I just want to touch on the point that you made, that this is scary stuff. I think what's scary about it is there's no linear path here. Innovation is rarely a straight line. It's rarely about saying that's where I want to go and then getting there. Generally, the companies that are best at innovation are the ones that take an agile approach, that take a step, evaluate, is this the right step forward, and then add another step on top of that. Assessing along the way as they engage with customers and get feedback, And so I think the story here is very much about setting up the right ingredients for inventing the future. So let's take an example of a company that's doing that. MGM Resorts International is essentially a house of brands. They have 15 different properties like the Bellagio in Las Vegas or the Aria. Generally, consumers don't know that these are affiliated. And what they said is, hey, we want to have a deeper relationship with the customer and be able to understand them over time and personalize the service that we deliver, the way that customer wants to receive it, very much in line with Tony's research. Now the challenge is immense. Each of these properties has their own legacy infrastructure, right? They've got each one has its own booking system. Each one has its own user store. Each one has its own gaming system, or everything's fragmented. So you're really starting from a place where it's very hard to assemble an idea of who the customer is. And this is kind of what we're talking about here today. All this transformation work starts with identity. It starts with understanding the customer and delivering experiences that delight the customer and are trusted. And so in this case, really the first hurdle that MGM has to overcome to unify the customer relationship is to unify the account. And so what they've done with Okta is to create one user identity, and that user identity is now shared across all of their hotels. It's a program that's called MLife. It's their loyalty program, and that tracks your points and things like that. It also gives you, importantly, one username and password for every touch point. With that foundation in place, now MGM Resorts can build a profile of the customer over time. They can say, okay, we saw, John attended MGM and he really liked the steak restaurant, and so now we're going to send offers about that kind of cuisine based on John's behavior. So it's the ultimate challenge. MGM is making really exciting progress, and it all starts with identity. And from there, they can do all kinds of powerful things like ensure easy access on the mobile device. Let your mobile device be the key to your room, things like that. And so I think this really speaks to quite a challenge when it comes to the technology side, which is a proliferation of access points. And I think Tony has a great way of thinking about this.
Let's turn to that, but I wanted to throw in the phrase that I've never fully understood, which is fail fast comes in when you start talking about agile and so on and so forth. But that to me just smacks of failing all the time. So
no, it's more to do with actually being prepared to fail, i.e. taking small steps and seeing if they work. And that's a big philosophical, to get back to the point of having philosophical conversations with the Register audience, challenge to get over. Many companies don't like the idea of failure at all. And so being prepared to move forward a step at a time and see if it works, and if it doesn't, change quickly. That's important, and that's a mindset difference.
So this isn't like a high school participation badge kind of top failer kind of big achievement thing going on. So,
I mean, let me frame it a different way, which is, if you don't take the agile approach, then you're signing up for a large investment that is nearly guaranteed to fail. So you're choosing between two difficult alternatives, both fraught with failure. One more likely to result in success.
The point is to use the small failures as a means of literally evolving. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't work, then you try something different. But you've got to be prepared to take the steps. And that's the same with identity management, because identity management, as it's been set up in most organizations, has been around forever. And it's become very static and risk averse. So not even ready to often take one step at a time to do something
sounds like my approach to cooking. Yeah, that didn't work. Let's try that again. Okay. So turning to if we look at this from the point of view of the customer as well, Tony.
Yeah.
Talk us through this one.
I mean, we've already covered a couple of the areas here, like with the web access and, the mobile devices adding to the complexity of identity management. And that's even before you start considering things like, smart devices inside organizations or inside cars, things like this. And then you've got the entire IoT area bringing in potentially orders of magnitude more identities that are going to need to be managed. And again, some of the identities that people are using or that are being used for data possibly could move around between 3 or 4 of these locations, but it's hard to do unless you've got a well thought out system in place first. And the problem is, as we said earlier, that identity has been managed in silos. Mm-hmm. And silos clearly don't work here. It's almost impossible, particularly when you've got them wrapped with manual processes that were designed in a different era. And that just adds to the inefficiency and the whole risk, because you make a mistake on identity management and there's a possibility these days that you could end up on the front page of the newspapers, never mind in court.
So having identity in any one of these areas is the wrong place for it. I feel an artificial segue coming on.
Yeah, well, you've also got the potential of people having multiple identities that are used again in different contexts, and how, if you're looking to try and get a big picture of the customer, do you put all of those together and manage it? It's all about that context, making sure that the right things happen in the right place, in the right time, on the right device.
I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I think this will resonate with just about every single person listening on this webinar.
I remember back when I was still an IT guy, which was a couple of decades ago now. We went out to try and create a very early identity management system for the organisation, and we asked for a list of the personnel IDs so that we could create identities for them on computers. That's how long ago this was. Mm-hmm. And we actually got about only 90% accuracy in terms of information from HR. So managing identities has been a problem forever, but now it's becoming an untenable problem. We've got to tackle it.
I'm nodding sagely here, which isn't coming across very well on the audio, I have to say. So maybe I'd turn back to you, Nadav, and say, is it that we shouldn't actually have identity in silos, but we should be considering an approach which has the identity across all of those areas?
Absolutely, and that kind of frames the job that customer identity management is really meant to do. It's meant to be a foundation that enables everything that Tony just talked about, and provides immense economies of scale. Right? Set it up once; it's portable for everything. And it's really, meant to address a couple issues, right? The first is user experience. If you've got this fragmented, siloed experience, chances are people are going to get annoyed with that, right? You're now asking people to do one of two things. Either remember separate credentials for separate things, or reuse credentials, which presents a security risk. Ultimately, what you want to do is to make the connection between the user and the device or the service or the application that they're using just completely seamless. That's the thing that's going to drive adoption and really set fire to the thing, the initiative that you're doing. I think of a great experience I recently had with an app called Hotel Tonight. It's an app that lets you book a hotel for the same day at a discounted rate. And they don't even require you to sign in, right? It's just such a delightful experience. I went through all the process of booking the hotel room, And then at the end of it, they said, oh, by the way, to validate your identity, we're just going to send you a link to your email. So I didn't have to fat finger a password or create an account or anything like that. It was just really easy. And within 5 minutes, I had a hotel room booked, and I didn't have to fumble around with a password. So I think that is going to drive immense engagement for them, and that's sort of the frame of mind that any technologist or business person needs to sort of approach the next stages of innovation with.
That is something I've never understood, when you don't know your password, and so you just say, send me another one, and it's like, did I just break everything, or am I still secure? I don't know, it's
Well,
That's right. Send me another password that I'll forget this time as well.
Exactly.
Well, you've also got the issue that many even of the established IT companies have users with multiple IDs that are completely out of touch with each other, and trying to get them to share information amongst them, or even for me with my multiple identities to share information amongst my identities, is nearly impossible.
I mean, this does start to it's not just about making it easier for the user, it's also about keeping it secure, right?
Yep.
And I think we have a slide on this. We have some data points, so let's turn to that.
It is indeed. We asked the Register audience, several times this sort of question in different ways, and the challenges are very, very clear. That people have issues with accessing data and making sure that it's accessed securely, appropriately, at the right time, in the right place. And that's getting made worse by, the way data is created all over the place. It moves around very freely. The way services are now often interlinked, and applications are built from, multiple applications that may live in different continents, even running by different organizations, and trying to control all of that simply makes everything very, very difficult. It's really about protecting, the user and the data, and making sure the linkage between the two is, very sound, and again takes place in the context of whatever the current process happens to be. We asked the Register audience on another occasion about, how do they see security going and moving away from, the old idea of firewalls and, network edge type boundaries, which is really what we're talking about here, because the edge has completely disappeared. And everyone sees the idea of actually moving that protection closer to the identity of the user and to the identity of the data. But it's a question of how to get there from here, given all these silos that we've got in place and all of these multiple tools that don't work very well together.
Just pausing there in case you had anything to add, Nadav.
I totally agree. Security is top of mind for anyone who's going online, right? Anyone who's building new technologies. You can't go a day without seeing another breach in the news. And generally, the breaches tend to focus on user identity, actually. So what you'll see is a headline that says 500 million passwords exposed, right? And the reason why you see that is because hackers are going for the user store. They're going for the most sensitive information, and ideally you're supposed to be storing the password more securely than anything in the service. So it's an extra prize if you're able to expose the passwords. Generally speaking, the customer information, the profile, the personally identifiable information, that is one of the most sensitive assets that a company has. And it tends to be the biggest target for attack. And so very relevant as we talk about identity and making that secure. Great quote from the CEO of Domino's. Domino's Pizza is one of these companies that has responded to the challenge and has really brought to bear the value that technology can drive. You can order your pizza online. You can watch it being made. you can track your pizza delivery on an Apple Watch, and they are just seeing tremendous growth in that business. Today in the UK, they do over 70% of revenue online. And a reporter recently asked the CEO of Domino's, what is keeping them up at night? What is at the top of the agenda? And Patrick Doyle, the CEO of Domino's, responded that cyber security is the top thing that he's worried about. Right? Most of his business is online.
Would you like cybersecurity with that?
Exactly. Would you like a little bit of cybersecurity with your pizza? The answer is yes. And that's because so much of his business is exposed to cyber that he has a responsibility to make his business secure.
And it's going to get even more publicly visible next year, certainly in Europe, as the GDPR legislation comes into effect, albeit with a notional transition period of a year. But from May the 23rd or something next year, the new data protection regulations come in that could essentially see fines being levied of 20% of worldwide revenue.
And that's including things like right to be forgotten and
it's about right to be forgotten, but it's also about protecting data and personally identifiable information in particular. That's really what it stems from.
Mm-hmm.
So these are issues that are going to, whilst the Domino's pizza CEO has got a challenge with this already, then it's going to be many, many more companies having to face up to this next year, because data is being lost, either through cyber threats or just sometimes carelessness and human action. And that really all stems down ultimately to managing identities properly and effectively and securely.
The good news is, I think that people are taking this seriously. Is that fair?
They're certainly taking it seriously, but as we said earlier, the question is how to get there from here. So, are these imperatives? Yep, you can see right at the bottom there, security, maintaining security and privacy in a highly connected world is easily had the highest number of people saying that it was either critical or important. And, we're up to 90% there. So 9 out of 10 people saying that it's absolutely something they've got to do. And most of the rest are unsure rather than saying, no, it doesn't apply to us. I'm not quite sure why people could be unsure about this sort of question. I don't know who's answering there. Maybe they let the toddler on. But it's something that is becoming more and more visible, to tackle this.
I mean, just to summarise where I think we've got to, essentially, and I'm not making this up, I'm actually thinking out loud. We've got the situation that it's harder and harder to manage lots of disparate identities, which translates into the way that people authenticate and get authorised to access online services. That is creating a massive security hole and big risk, as well as all that inefficiency. But kind of over to you, Nadav. Go on. Sorry, Tony.
It's also going to be compounded by IoT and more devices being connected, because those also need to have some control on top of them and how they're managed.
So personal toaster firewall kind of.
I'm hoping not, but it's certainly the sort of thing that you're going to have with more and more of your heating systems being controlled centrally. You can see how quickly people can hack videos. There's a story on the Register this morning saying 83 seconds to hack someone's video and get in there. So it's making sure that you know the identity of all these machines that are communicating with you, or that are inside your house or your office or your enterprise, your cars, your vehicles, communicating with multiple other services.
So we just had a clarification. Sorry, Nadav, go on.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Tony said. If you think about the attack on Dime from last month, that was all driven by dumb IoT machines that essentially had a very simple hard-coded passcode, right? The identity of those machines was not managed well. It was not trusted. It was not secure. And so the consequences is truly immense. And the challenge of managing those things is just now starting to be understood.
So you're going to be kept busy then, Nadav.
That's right. That's a good thing.
I mean, we've deliberately put a list of questions up here, almost just to reinforce these points. Maybe you could just run us through this.
Yeah, I think essentially every organization is now needing to be a lot more thoughtful about security and how does it balance security with user experience. And so that has like several layers. It has the layer of the infrastructure and the devices. Then it has layers of people, users, and organization, and then process. And how do you pull all those things together to make sure that you are achieving your business goals, you are able to drive the kind of adoption that you want, while at the same time protecting this very critical user information. And so this is a new muscle. Companies have to develop a new muscle to really grapple with the challenges of achieving this goal.
If I just quickly flick on, I mean, the problem I see is that it's a dilemma, right? You want to give people access, but you want to prevent people from having access. You want to make things private, but you want to make things more and more accessible and public. Reducing risk at the same time as innovation. I think you got your work cut out there.
I really like how you put that. You absolutely do have your work cut out for you. I think the good news here is that there is a technology answer to this stuff, right? And I come back to the topic today. Customer identity management is the solution to solving a lot of these challenges. I would put that identity is the cornerstone of creating user experiences that are awesome, but also secure. So, for example, we now have all kinds of interesting ways to authenticate users that are far more secure than anything we've done in the past, but easier to use as well. So, for example, if there's a new multi-factor authentication method where you're simply prompted on your phone to accept a push notification, right? That's a massive improvement, above and beyond the older sort of one-time password approaches. It's delightful for the end user, maybe even fun. It creates kind of a trusted relationship between the user and what they're accessing, and it's out of band, right? It's far more secure than anything we've done. I think you're going to see quite a lot of innovation here as devices become smarter and they become enlisted in managing access for the end user. So I guess my net point here is that every organization is facing quite a slew of challenge as it relates to these issues, but the good news is there's a whole raft of products and services designed to address these, Okta included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it brings up a whole raft of other questions that people do need to consider, at a very high level. You had on the previous slide questions about, how do you govern who has access to what, and how do you actually monitor all of the access to make sure that it's appropriate and kept up to date? Because that's the other thing with keeping these systems, real time as things change so quickly. And yep, sorry for the slip of the tongue earlier when I said 20% of revenues. It's 4% of revenues up to $20 million, but still that's a chunk of money, and it can be for each instance rather than just that's a one-off.
And thank you, Martin and Gideon, for pointing it out. It's good to know that the Register audience are on the ball and listening intently to what we're saying. And while we're in that parenthesis, in response to Nats, the name of the wealth management firm was Field Point Private, and just to let everybody on the webcast to know, the slides will be available after the webcast for you to download and use at your leisure, and There's also a couple of links at the end that we'll put up that will also be on the slides available for download. So with that in mind, I think what we're starting to get to is, yeah, sure, we've identified the problem, and also I don't think I was putting it too strong at the beginning when I said this is actually a philosophical take. We're actually talking about, if I may, something that we could call identity-oriented architecture. Or so. Essentially, start by thinking about identity, start specifically thinking about customer identity, and if you start there, then you can you're in a better place to start thinking about how to solve it.
I think it's a question, actually, as you say, start thinking about identity rather than just accepting that it's there and it's the same as it's always been.
We're going to need some of that. Yeah,
we've got the whole inertia of we've been doing this for decades. Why do we need to change it? Well, the evidence is clear that we need to change it. It's a question of you've got to do it now, because pretty soon it's going to become untenable.
Mm-hmm. So let's build on that, and what else do we need to think about when in terms of our starting point? I mean, yes, sure. On the slide we say take a strategic approach. I mean, what else are we going to say? So how does that actually map into practice? What kinds of things do people need to start doing? Hand that over to both of you guys. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll chip in first if you like.
Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you. The things here are really about working out what is the identity. So is it just people, or do you need to move identity onto devices, and what are the context in how you use them? And that they are relatively high level. It's stuff that you've got to sit down and get time to think about. So that's really the starting point. What should identity in your organization look like? And more importantly, to get back to something Nadav said a few minutes ago, what are the processes you need to wrap around that? Because, with whatever technology solution you put in to tackle this, because you will need technology, you've got to have the right processes to keep it working as things change continuously. Because it's not just, that technology is changing step by step, and we're taking that, agile approach to things, but identities are changing, sometimes, potentially second by second, depending on the context.
If I can be really dumb, is it a case of... it comes naturally, by the way. Is it a case of actually starting from the point of view of trying to work out what you're trying to identify? I mean, Is it the customer? Is it the toaster? Is it the light bulb?
Is it the data? It could be all of those. It could be none of them. It could be any combination of them. Potentially many more as well.
I do think my role on these webinars is to act the dumb guy, and over years I've managed to hone it to an art. I think. I mean.
You learn from me, John. We've worked together a long time.
Highly skilled at looking dumb. Nadav, is there anything you'd add to what Tony said there?
Yeah, I think we started this session talking about how the world has changed, how we need to think about identity differently. One interesting thing about sort of looking forward and trying to create an identity strategy is that for the first time ever, your identity strategy has stakeholders outside of IT. Now the CMO cares about how you're going to manage identity. The head of security cares. The head of products. The head of customer support, right? All of these folks are going to be impacted by your approach to identity. And so it's a team sport. Right? Identity is a team sport that involves the business and the technology team. I think the other point I'd want to share is that you ought to start small, right? You ought to identify sort of where you're going, but then, to the point about experimentation and innovation, take baby steps toward your goal. That's what I would add.
We've just had a really good question in fact, we've had a couple of questions in which kind of fit into one, which is around two-factor identification, really. So Barry asks, am I going to have to be using multiple devices simultaneously? For example, if I'm using two-factor authentication for Google, it's only useful if I have a smartphone, if I have it by my side, if I have it charged. What about those of us who just want to log on to? Are we Are we classified as hopelessly out of date? Asks Barry. And then Gideon also asks, what if I've stolen the phone? If I get to put the SMS, am I in? So they're two sides of the same question, really.
It's interesting as well that in Germany, when they were using, sending one-time codes out to smartphones, most of the banks, until very, very recently, suggested that you not do it on a smartphone, that you use dumb phones to receive those codes on.
Right.
Partly to make them less of a target for theft, but also to try and get rid of some of the potential identity theft of the device itself questions.
But presumably, Nadav, if you're being customer-oriented, you've got to work in the way that customers are actually going to work, not in the way that you want them to work.
That's right. You've got to design for the reality of the world and the customer reality. I'm quite optimistic here. I think there's some really interesting designs and ideas about how to make this stuff user-friendly yet secure. So, for example, as the phone becomes smarter, you can have it do more work. Presumably, it reaches a point where it has high confidence that you are who you are, that you are you, and then it can serve as a second factor quite reliably. Really great development with Touch ID. Bringing a biometric factor to mobile devices. I think that you're going to see more of that with other kinds of methods for authenticating the person, and then that can take the friction out of it. There certainly are going to be you'll never be able to remove every social engineering or other kind of hack, but you can make it a lot harder. And so I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing in terms of where this all is going.
The other thing there is that identity and people is an issue. Security, as we've talked about on many webcasts on the Register, is a challenge. If people think that something gets in the way, any security steps get in the way, then they work around them. And it's the same with identity here. So there might be some transactions you're happy just to type in a password for, whereas others you might want to have that second factor of authentication there to add to the security. And it's a question of what's the user population of your organization going to be willing to accept. And to a degree, there might be an element of education required there to get them to recognize the value of taking that extra step of having the phone with them or not.
I was thinking about that exact point because, for example, I can use Touch ID to buy parking in my local town, which I know I've read that Touch ID is not necessarily 100% secure, but if someone wanted to steal my phone and then by parking locally, they're probably that's probably not going to break the bank. So it's a kind of very low risk. It's about horses for courses. I don't live in London, no.
But you've got all that wealth anyway.
I live in a place where I left my laptop outside a pub and came back an hour later and it was still there. It's a lovely place. But all of that to say, and I think that does give us a good segue onto the next chart, Nadav, which is.
I was going to say one thing from this chart that's really important is that final bullet point at the bottom there, the agile part, and that's because the identity system you set up today is probably not going to be the one you need tomorrow, so it needs to be able to change and evolve with your requirements.
Okay. And thank you for that, Tony. Very good point. And flicking on to the next slide, more reasons to not try and make a one-size-fits-all. I think it's Nadav. It's about different solutions for different audiences. So here, business to consumer and business to business.
Yeah, your requirements are going to be different. I think important for our audience to know is that for the first time ever, it's possible to manage every identity that touches an organization with the same identity layer. So for folks who are familiar with this technology, historically there was a piecemeal approach to it. You would have AD running employees, You would have some kind of federation server stood up for employees. Maybe you have a different system for partners, B2B partners, and yet a third system for consumers. Today, that is all coming together as solutions evolve to handle all identities, and that just makes things so much faster, right? So while the requirements for each of these user populations are different, you're able to serve them with one solution. And that, for example, let's say, I was talking to a large enterprise. They operate an online e-commerce solution where customers can go on and buy their products. Now, if you think about it, they're not, consumers are not the only people gaining access to the service. Their internal employees are gaining access. Franchisees are gaining access. And so, really, actually, at the end of the day, for the most part, every resource is going to need to be accessed by all different kinds of people. And so rather than having to wire in every different user population separately, you can do it all together. And so certainly there are different requirements. Consumers are going to need things like social sign-in. Business users are going to need to sign in through their directory. But thanks to the cloud and identity delivered as a service, you're able to really serve all these needs together, which is very, very exciting and speaks to Tony's point from the earlier slide about moving fast.
Yeah, there's that word again, isn't there, agile? And that's the bit in the middle, presumably, that we're actually talking about an identity platform here that can serve multiple needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's,
exactly right.
Yeah, it's an area that needs some thought, particularly around the processes that you have to wrap around all of this, and just basically getting that understanding of your business now on how it's likely to change in the future. So what, as you said earlier, does the identity really look like, and what does it need to look like versus what have we got today?
Now, I'm sure, Nadav, I'm sure you'd right at the point of saying, and of course we can provide all of that to everyone. So I'm not going to turn to you next. I'm going to go to Tony, because as people start putting, let's say, money where their mouth is, and say, well, yeah, okay, we want to solve this problem. We recognise that we can take an identity-centric approach, and it's great to know there's products out there. But as they start putting a business case together, a really important question is, what don't they need to just rush out and buy, and what can be reused from existing systems, and then of course what does need to be replaced, what isn't working?
Well, it's going to differ organisation by organisation, but the first point about what can you reuse, well, clearly you've got a lot of information in your identity management systems already, and you're not going to throw that away. I mean, even if you could throw it away, you'd probably stop your business if you did. So this is not a rip and replace time. Rip and replace rarely works in any area of IT, and certainly not in identity management. So you're going to keep the information you've got there. What you need to do is actually go through them to see, well, what information are you keeping in there now? What shouldn't be in there? And then what extra do you need to do? And more importantly, what is it absolutely not covering at all? Mm-hmm. And so that's when you get into, those are the bits that need to be, if not replaced, actually created afresh. So it might be a better question to ask here. And that's, getting onto that, what must be added. And the big points there are not just, the new identities and types of identity, because you can end up with a completely new batch of things you'd never thought about before. But it's really going to be around that process, and what's the operational process you need to put around this to keep it all working effectively. And that needs basically someone to sit down and do a lot of upfront thinking. And we know from the audience that finding the time to actually do that, look, let's create a completely clean sheet of paper to work out what we need. It's hard to get the time to do that, but it's really important in this particular context, maybe more so than any other we've spoken about.
I'm going to show my inexperience here and say, well, I would have thought if we are starting to talk about customer data and so on, the first port of call would be the online repository of customer logins or the CRM database. Am I looking in the wrong places, Nadav, or am I? Should I be starting there, and therefore do I end up with yet another integration layer? How did all that pan out?
Yeah, So you're absolutely right, and I think Tony nailed it. You've already got this data for the most part, unless it's totally greenfield, which is, it's cool if you have that opportunity. But you've got directories, you've got your CRM. The beauty of the solutions out there today are that they integrate and they interoperate with your existing infrastructure, and they're designed to be extensible in a way that can connect to everything. So that's in a lot of cases you can really keep everything you've got in place and layer on top this new capability, which is really, really exciting.
And that's the standard-based API bit, is it?
There's different capabilities depending on what you're trying to do. If you've got a directory service, an LDAP or an AD, then integration, at least with Okta service, is out of the box and happens in a matter of minutes. If you're running a database, then we have capabilities for essentially managing user attributes and user data and syncing them between systems. And so it sort of depends on the kind of data you want to move around. But I think the good news is that, just to Tony's point, you're not necessarily looking at rip and replace.
And I've only just noticed that often a sponsoring a company would put up a kind of set of things that they integrate with at this point, Nadav. So good on you for not doing that. But I feel kind of bereft that you're not talking about your own product and how it integrates with other things. So I mean, presumably it does plug in to Salesforce and everything else.
Yeah. So thanks for the plug.
That's all right.
So
you're not doing it, so someone's got to.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. At Okta, we've built the largest catalog of application integrations, largest and deepest. And for example, out of the box, Okta comes with a pre-built integration to Salesforce, where we can sync user data back and forth. We've got extensible connectors for databases. So, for example, you can write a connector to any data service, any data source anywhere. And then the beauty of it is that it all comes together in our directory, which is a true meta directory. So we can stitch together the user profile attribute by attribute. So let's say your address comes from Salesforce, but your phone number comes from an on-prem database, no problem. That all shows up in Okta, and then that context is there for everyone. And it can be connected to anything via standards, SAML, OpenID Connect, OAuth. It's all available as a service.
Cool. That could have been the most awkward silence ever if you said, actually, no, we don't integrate with Salesforce. That could have been very unfortunate.
The interesting challenge that often comes up here, because there are so many silos that you need to integrate with, it's how to do some reconciliation amongst the various metadata that you have stored in all of these repositories, because there are bound to be conflicts. So again, that's getting up, well, what's your process for making this work, and understanding what information have you got out there, what's useful, how can you exploit it.
I mean, from the duffer's perspective, the person that doesn't know anything about this area's perspective, it's to me, it's again starting with that, what you're trying to identify. If you're trying to identify a customer, that doesn't mean records in a database. That means who. It's what's the person, and if you've got 4 different places with 4 different sets of information, you want to pull that stuff together.
Well, interestingly, it could not just be who; it could also be what. Because these days with IoT and these ideas of the mythical internet-connected fridge and the internet-connected washing machine and whatever, televisions, smart televisions already, they also need to be identified with the customer.
I mean, to be honest, if we were about to run out of milk, I don't want to be involved. I just want to go to the fridge. I don't know if if you're in an office, you just want to go to the fridge and find that someone else has been to the shop and bought the milk. You don't want to have to do that. So the sooner we can get this stuff in place, the better. I'm gonna start wrapping up now, and just from the point of view of what we should be leaving people with in terms of advice, maybe I'll go to both of you in turn. Maybe yourself first, Nadav, about where should people start? What kinds of things, not just buy our stuff, but what kinds of things should people be thinking about in order to set off on the right foot on having a better customer-oriented identity management solution in place?
Yeah, so I think it all starts with the business case. It all starts with understanding the business problem you're trying to solve. I mean, technology is great and exciting, and certainly I'm very excited about what can be done today, but really it's about three levers when you're thinking about identity. What are the pain points relative to user experience? Map that out across all your different user groups, employees, business partners, consumers. What security vulnerabilities are out there as they relate to access? Can I address those with new tools? And can I monetize that? Can I somehow think about what is the value of a security breach or reduce risk? And then finally, operational efficiency, and this tends to be a huge driver for a lot of companies that I work with. What are the operations that I'm currently involved in or paying for that might go away? So do I have a full-time staff that's actually out there resetting passwords? So that I would say that's kind of food for thought. Start with the business case. Think about those three value drivers. If you see that there's material in each of those, then it's certainly worth thinking about where you go with identity.
When you say start with the business case, is it possible to think about identity management as a thing that you're going to get a return on investment from, or should you just really see it as a cost and get on with it and grit your teeth?
It's really the former. Identity management should really justify itself, and the business case should be clear. So if you're not seeing the dollars and cents, then it's certainly something we can help you with. We've got tremendous technology for analyzing these scenarios, but yeah, you absolutely need to see an ROI here.
The other point is that we know, again, from talking to the readers of the Reg, that quite often they are inhibited from doing new things because of questions about, can we actually achieve this at scale? And one of the potential things that you could look here, on that business case side of things, is the opportunity to do new stuff. To create new services for users, maybe even change the way some of the existing internal processes run. There's lots of opportunity here, so there is some upside as well as just basically cost savings. You've got to do identity management, yes, that's an absolute, but if you do it well, then you do have, the upside as well as the, yes, it's something that you have to do.
And do these principles apply equally to big companies and small companies and even startups, or do they have are there different things that a big company should be doing rather than the small company wouldn't need to?
The scales are obviously different, but the point is you've still got to know, who are the people accessing your systems? What should they be accessing? How do you know whether you've got anything going wrong? And how do you keep this running over years and years and years and years and years? So it applies to small, big and large companies, but obviously the larger companies have got, by and large, much bigger customer bases they needed to worry about. Although that's changing now with the booming internet economy, where you can have some of these very small companies that we've talked about in terms of the number of people they have in them versus the user base that they have accessing them from smart apps and things like this. So it applies to everybody. I think you're going to have to come up with some new definitions of small companies now, because you can have some small companies that are small in terms of the number of people in them, but are serving huge populations. And
that does go back to the startup. Go on, Nadav, sorry.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with what Tony said. I think depending on who you are, your challenges are going to be different, your business case is going to be different, but nevertheless, now is a really interesting time to think about identity, and if you can reap the benefits of what the latest identity technologies can offer. If you're a startup, like Tony was saying, you may be serving large number of users, and so scale is going to be very important. If you're a big company, you may have a fragmentation problem of all this legacy infrastructure. You may need to address that. And so, I think now's a great time for any type of company to take a look at this.
Okay, well, I think we're just about on the hour, so I've put up the last couple of links. As I said, I'm not going to try to read those out, but you can download this presentation afterwards and click on those links if you want to read any more about what Okta bring to the party or views from IDG. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to both of our panelists, to Tony Locke and to Nadav Benbarak, for any information. If you've got any further questions, then send them by email, and we'll endeavour to respond to them. Thank you very much for your time, and speak to you next time.